Hello and welcome to Buy Africa, the show where we focus on investment opportunities around the continent. I'm Tshepo Modiba and thanks for joining me. Tonight, I'm joined by Gerhard le Roux, Africa Sales Trading at Momentum SP Reid Securities. Gerhard, thank you for joining us. We're going to jump off. I love these positive discussions with positive tones. Let's start with a question that I guess a lot of people have on their minds. Is the Africa story still relevant? Is it still likely to reward investors going forward?
I'd say, well, yeah, I absolutely think so. We've got a massive demographic push on the African continent. We're sitting with roughly 1 billion people, and that's set to increase substantially over the next sort of 35 years to the region of 2 billion around about 2050. So those consumers really will be earning more, will be spending. Within that context, there's huge potential for the African environment to create investment value and to create positive returns for investors.
So in spite of what seems to be a very depressed investor environment where certainly returns aren't looking that healthy, there's still a lot to be positive about. Actually, maybe even because returns have been quite negative, there's even more to be positive about.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think when you look at individual on the company level, there's real outperformers where the underlying markets might not necessarily be showing that things are too easy for the companies themselves on the ground, or the consumers might be feeling under stress because they might not have as much cash in their pockets as they had a year ago. But those companies are still really doing amazing things.
Right. Let's focus in on East Africa, specifically Kenya. That's actually one of the few regions where the stock market actually is held up quite nicely. Your view of what Kenya is doing well overall?
So I think on a macro level, Kenya and East Africa in general is not as directly exposed to extractive resources. So they're not as reliant on extractive resources to gain foreign currency and have their foreign cash flow. They've diversified into large-scale agriculture, services, the whole lot. And within that, it sort of leaves the economy in a better position when commodity prices do turn down. Obviously, they were affected like everyone else, but the growth story there is still really strong. Kenya this year looks like they're going to grow around about 5%, and in the backdrop of that sort of economy, it's still really strong growth. The companies are doing exceptionally well.
No, that sounds like a very positive story, especially given what global growth is doing in 2016. Let's delve into underlying companies within Kenya. Anything that's really standing out in terms of operationally doing really well?
Yeah, so Safaricom has been the one talked about for very many years in the Kenyan market, but that really is the bellwether of stocks, and they've come out with results to surprise the market to the upside. They've made almost 200 billion Kenyan shillings in revenue this year, had substantial push in terms of mobile data. It has contributed 40% of their growth in that segment, and then also M-Pesa and the tie-up with KCB, Kenya Commercial Bank has really done well for the company. The growth in M-Pesa has now for the year was 27%, and the amount of loans now between that have been provided to consumers is in the region of 8 billion shillings. So there's very strong fundamental growth in that market, and this company especially has used innovation to grow within their market and really push on.
You touch on a very key word there, innovation. Certainly this is probably one of the more innovative businesses on the continent, really. Do you likely, is this what we really need to see in terms of businesses doing operationally well, that actually you need to be a little bit creative, you need to take advantage of where technology is going?
I absolutely agree with that. When it comes to the African story, infrastructure is always something that you hear a lot about. There's sort of lacking infrastructure in terms of electricity or sort of banking infrastructure, and the whole story. Where Safaricom looked at the environment, they said, okay, well, it's very difficult for us to send money over great distances. So gap that infrastructure. We provide a product to our consumers that they're going to use in their everyday lives, so they don't have to go to a bank each time they transact. And that's been a genius innovation. And the same story now with tapping into your network of consumers to provide them loan facilities on your platform, on your banking platform, is really starting to take off, and that's a great innovation for them.
In terms of the platform or the ability of Safaricom to further see strong revenue growth and profitability growth, is there still room here?
Yeah, look, they are the biggest player in the market. They've roughly got 67% of consumers. So organic growth within the economy is probably going to be a bit challenging in the years to come.
Right.
But the thing is, you still have the strong growth of the underlying economy. So your ARPUs, your average rate per user, the amount that a user spends on your platform, as the economy grows, that's going to increase, and the likes of M-Pesa can be even more entrenched into the everyday life. And when it comes to banking, there's huge synergies that can be extracted between Safaricom and Kenya Commercial Bank as a result.
And do we think that at some stage there's scope for them to expand beyond the region?
Yeah, look, I'd imagine so. They've been unfortunately quite successful in the South African context. I think the banking infrastructure here just didn't lead to that really being a necessity to the average consumer. While in the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, there really is the need for that. We've seen the likes of EcoBank in Zimbabwe do it very successfully. So if you translate that model into maybe selling that onto or giving licenses to other providers in other countries, it could potentially be a great one for them.
So operationally, this sounds like a great story to tell. Does that translate to the same thing in terms of potential from an investment case perspective?
Yeah, I believe so. As you mentioned before, the Kenyan market has been better performing, but it's still been fairly depressed over 2015.
Right.
And as a result, sort of investors in general are looking at Kenya and treading with caution because of the broader African story. So when I think a bit more positivity comes back into the market, there's going to be a nice upswing in the stocks that have done really well, that have performed. The ground operations are strong and stable, and those stocks can really kick on. So I think for investors taking a bit of a longer term view and prepared to take that additional bit of risk where Africa is not as favourable right now, could potentially see a nice swing.
Okay. Looking elsewhere in the Kenyan market, anything else look particularly interesting?
Yeah, so I mentioned the tie-up with Kenya Commercial Bank,
right,
and then Safaricom. So if an investor would like to diversify, I think Equity Bank is also, Equity Bank. Sorry, right, Equity Bank is the other major sort of innovator within the market, and they've been really well positioned to go to the smaller consumer to effectively do something the likes what Capitec has done in South Africa.
Okay. In terms of Equity Bank, their strategy, are they also looking to increase penetration via mobile banking? Is this an area of focus?
Absolutely, that's been one of their key areas of focus. I'm not entirely sure if they've managed to penetrate the market as successfully as the tie tie-up Safaricom and Kenya Commercial, but they have been pushing to bring those little shadow SIM cards, so to allow the banking platform to be mobile.
Right. The bank in particular, one of the more fascinating ones, really good profitability. Is there also still growth here for this bank to grow in the Kenyan market? Yeah,
I believe so. When it comes to penetration, you have the lower income segment that is still fairly untapped, and once you bring them into the broader market into the fold, there could potentially be good profits to be made.
Right. So it looks like almost both the consumer segment and banking in particular are areas where you probably want to take a look at in Kenya in particular. So still decent valuations on Equity Bank? Yeah,
really strong valuations. You've seen one of the smaller banks exit the market earlier on in the year, and I think that's really brought into question the models of the Kenyan banks in general. But I think that provides a real opportunity for the strong banks in the sector for investors to pick up the strong banks in the sector and get through the valuations.
Now, a big picture perspective, Kenya in particular, is one of the benefits right now that actually the currency is fairly stable in comparison to some of the other currencies on the continent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Central Reserve Bank has been really focused on inflation rates. It has been ticking up towards the 8%
right
in the beginning of the year, so it is at sort of a danger level. But they are really focusing on getting that right and making sure that the economy is stable and with a key focus on inflation.
And those increasing interest rates not going to put too much strain on non-performing loans for the likes of Equity Bank?
Could potentially, but the thing is, if investors take a bit of a longer term view, these are purely cyclical.
Right.
And the banks are really strong and stable. These are the major banks in the economy, and I believe that they dealt it really well.
Okay. A scope for Equity Bank, again, regionally and beyond? Is there scope for them to expand outside of Kenya?
Yeah, potentially there is. The whole East African story has been really interesting with players moving across borders fairly easily regionally. So with Rwanda, Uganda, and Tanzania, the very strong economies, and obviously having their issues, but I believe that there is opportunity for the banks to move and directly compete in those markets.
See, this is my favorite kind of discussion. Ends on a positive note. Let's leave it there, Gerhard.
Thank you.
Thanks to my guest, Gerhard le Roux, Africa Sales Trading at Momentum SP Reid Securities. That's all from Buy Africa this week. Remember to follow me on Twitter. That's @Modiba_Tshepo, and send us your thoughts about the show using the hashtag BuyAfrica. For myself and the team, goodbye.